handful of people wanted to know my bread recipe. I'm making a great big batch. And the nice thing about this bread recipe is it scales up really easy. So you can double it, triple it, quadruple it. I do it in quadruples. And so I'm going to go through the recipe as though you're trying to make 2 loaves of bread, but I'm actually quadrupling it. And you can do that really easily with this recipe. It's just a white bread. It's great for French toast. So I'll walk you through the steps. So start with the pot. And typically, 1 cup of milk. I'm putting in 4 cups of milk. And bear with me here, the camera angle's not great. So, cup of milk. Just gonna get some water here. Yeah, and like I said, this one doubles up really, really well. So if you want to make 4 loaves, so this recipe makes 2 loaves of bread, but we're quadrupling it. So we'll call that a cup of milk and a cup of water. And what I do is I just turn it on kind of medium-high heat for a few minutes. You just want it warm. You don't want it hot, because too hot will kill off the yeast. So then I've got sugar in one of these Tupperware containers, but you want 2 tablespoons of sugar. I'm quadrupling that. So 2 tablespoons of sugar. And then 1 tablespoon of salt. Again, I'm quadrupling. It also calls for vegetable shortening or lard. I don't have any. I just put a little bit of canola oil. I don't know, superstitious. Then what I do is I just whisk that up. I get that stuff all whisked in. So it's all nice and mixy. So it's all soaked in. And then it calls for a tablespoon of butter. I'm estimating a little bit here. I'm doing 4 tablespoons-ish of butter. Ish. And I know everyone says that baking is this precise thing, but you know, that's what I'd say too if I didn't have any soul. But this tends to work really well. So usually what I do is I keep an eye on this for a few minutes. I just want it warm enough to melt the butter and then mix it in. And then while that's going, hot water in a mixing bowl. And a little bit of sugar in there. And then it says 2 tablespoons of yeast. I've been using the quick rise yeast. It does kind of speed things up a little bit. Call me a cheater if you want, but man, it works well. So then it says 2 tablespoons. I'm using a whole lot more. And then whisk that up. And usually, by the time the yeast has risen up all nice and pretty and fluffy, then this is ready to go. But I'm cheating a little bit because I'm a bit naughty that way. I'm going to set that aside. I already have some ready to go. So this is some of the stuff that's already nice and warm. So it's that mix of milk, water, butter, sugar, and salt. And then this is the yeast. As you can see, it's nice and floofy. It's all floofed up. And that's what you want. That's the technical term from the Joy of Cooking, is floofy yeast. Then I put that in there. And then I whisk that up. And now we're going to go over to station number 2. So station number 2 is we're going to mix this flour with that mixture that we have. I like doing this in the sink. It saves an awful lot of mess rather than on the counter, because the whole process is messy enough. But basically what I do, and hopefully you can get a sense of the texture here, but I pour about 1/3 in at a time, and then in the mixing bowl, sorry, it's kind of hard to see, in the mixing bowl, I just make sure I'm scooping up from the bottom. Oh, by the way, flour. I should have specified. The flour is about 6 cups. Again, I've quadrupled that, so we're at about 24 cups. And so it's big batches of bread. This makes about 10 loaves when I do it this size. So what you're trying to do as you mix it, you can see I'm just kind of scooping up and dropping. Scoop up and dropping. And you can kind of see it's starting to get some stringy bits. I'll add another third. And then as I scoop in, I'm digging in from the bottom and kind of fluffing it up. Trying to get as much air into the mix as possible. Another third there. You know, and I'm not super exacting in terms of how I do this. One of the mistakes that I used to make was I'd put in all the liquid at once and I would let it get really soupy. And what I found was my loaves were kind of collapsing because they were too wet, and I don't know if it just didn't let enough air in or what. I also found that when I started doubling the recipe, I probably wasn't kneading enough, so one of those two things caused the bread to be a little bit flat. It would rise really nicely, and it would rise nicely in the pan. It would go into the oven, and I'd be so proud and so excited. You can see what that's starting to look like there? It's still like individual chunks and a little bit flaky. It isn't kind of one great big mass yet. And I always keep an extra bowl of flour, so if I get a little too soupy, I can add some in. Because again, I'm not really gearing for an exact science here. But you do get a sense of the consistency you want. And you want it to start mixing relatively dry. And I'll show you, I'll pull the camera. This is just about perfect here right now. Now, the trick I find is scooping way down to the bottom. There's often little pockets of flour down in there, so I get way down in. And the really nice thing is while you're baking, you can try the dough. It's really yummy. So, this is just about the perfect consistency. Kind of hard to, but you can see it's still just a little bit stringy. It's not a soupy mess. It's really, really, really sticky. So I'm going to move us over to station 3 where we're going to knead this bread. Okay, station 3, we're going to knead this bread. As you can see, it gets pretty messy here, but one of the signs that I've learned to look for, I'm going to turn this up a little bit, to make sure that I've got kind of the right consistency is if I turn the bowl upside down, it should pretty much plop out. Like that. Scoop out anything left in the bowl. And then, typically what I do, you just sprinkle some flour over that. This one doesn't stick to my hands too bad. Now look, here's the thing I want you to remember, because I had to teach myself this. People who really bake a lot of bread are going to watch this and say, no, that's not how you knead bread, that's not how you mix the flour, and that's not how you do this. And that's the problem when people are really good at something, is they make it seem more intimidating than it ought to be. And I'm sure that my nanny had a better way of doing this. But you know what? My nanny was kind of a bag sometimes. So like, not everything she did was perfect. Yeah, spanked me for putting my brother down the laundry chute. Can you imagine? So I don't want to add too much flour. You know, and as you knead, and again, this is big. This is 4 times the regular recipe. As you knead, you can start to feel it spring back. And like actually feel quite elastic and pushing back. And that is kind of, but yeah, I don't know if you can see So, I mean, it shouldn't be too soupy. It's a little bit sticky, but you want to basically keep adding flour, just a little sprinkle of flour now and then, until it doesn't stick to your hand so much. Like I said before, I was making it way too wet previously, and I found it was just a huge mess sticking to the table, sticking to my hands. And as I said, it wouldn't rise properly. It would rise initially, but it would kind of sink in the bowls. I'm almost going to call that good. Because I mean, you really feel it, especially with a batch like this. It almost starts to push back. It gets to be quite a good workout. Now, I should have had a mixing bowl ready for that to, there we go. Nothing too fancy. I didn't even clean it. Got a mixing bowl right there. Now, I'm going to have to go and clean that mixing bowl that I started it in, because that's really, that's going to be too big for this. Because as you can see, it's really filled that bowl. But what you want to do now, for the sake of demonstration, is throw a dishcloth over it, set it aside somewhere warm, and then let it double in size. And then once it's doubled in size, we'll pull it into loaves. And that will be step 3. I guess step 4. It'll be step 4. So, station number, I can't quite remember anymore. So we've got the, I let the dough rise, and it was kind of going all over. And then you just kind of punch it down to let the air out. And then what I do, I keep that pot of flour handy. I just get my hands kind of covered in flour. And then I really just kind of work out, as you can see, work out a loaf. I just kind of pull it along. And then it is a little bit easier. It's a little bit easier with a little bit of flour in your hands. But I'm just kind of working out roughly the length and size of the loaf that I want. Like this. And again, all of you itty bitties out there telling me that, you know, blah, 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 there's a better way to do it, you're handling the dough too much. I don't care. This works. Then I set it in the pan like this. Do another one. Because like I say, this recipe, you can see I just kind of pull the shape out. You can see that or not. A little bit of flour in my hand. This recipe is really for 2 loaves. I find when I quadruple it, it's really good for 5 loaves, but it must be 2 big loaves that it would make. See what I mean there? That's got a nice shape. See that? That's a nice looking loaf of bread. So, then what we do is we let that rise in the oven. I'm going to show you that in a sec. So these go in a warm oven, or just on the counter. You can put a cloth over it, but they should double in size till they're kind of nice and rounded over. Burp, 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 like that. But usually what I do is after I've baked some, I'll put it in the oven. I might turn the oven on to like 170, then turn it off, leave the door open just so it gets nice and warm, and then I let it rise until it's ready to be baked. So there's our loaves in the oven. The oven's not on, it's just still warm from the last batch that I cooked, but if your oven's not warm, you can always just turn it up to like the lowest setting and then turn it off, leave the door open for a bit. But I'll wait until those have kind of rose up and they've filled the pans, then we'll turn the oven on. Okay, let's see if this stuff has risen. Yeah, we're in a different oven because I've been doing multiple batches, but if we look, yep, you can see it's nice and poofy. They're nice and they've kind of rose up to it's about full size. I don't make super big loaves. I guess I could do bigger loaves. But so now we are going to transfer them to the other oven that is set to 350 degrees, and we're going to give it 40 minutes at 350. Okay, the buzzer just went off, so it should be done here. So we did 40 minutes at 350. And sometimes what I do is once the bread has rose in the oven, I'll just turn the oven on to 350 in 40 minutes then, because I think the original recipe that I started with said 35 minutes at 350. But it takes 5 minutes to get up to 350, so just instead of switching ovens. But in this case, I already had the other oven going at 350, so let's take a look. I'll get an oven mitt on here. Oh, yes, sir. Look at that. So that's a pretty handsome loaf of bread. I'm not going to deny it. And we've got quite a bit on the go here, as you can see. Pops out of the pan pretty easy, especially if you use the non-stick pans. Yeah. And then I just, woo, that's hot. Who'd have thunk it? I just let it cool down on the oven, or on the rack, sorry, and it's good to go. So that's my Christmas French toast white bread recipe. Hope you enjoy it. Hope it wasn't too long. This is a long video.